Welcome to Perspectives On, where we're giving the world a voice. I'm Lairalaine White, your host. In Congress, it is often referred to as House Resolution 109 and Senate Resolution number 59. We know it as the Green New Deal. It is a proposal that was originally sponsored by Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Massachusetts Democratic Senator Ed Markey on March 25th, 2019. The resolution originally failed to advance in the U.S. Senate in a margin of 0 to 57. But this concept, it is a concept that has been in dialogue for years, since the early 2000s. And it brings forth some of Franklin Delano Roosevelt's economic approaches with some ideas of renewable energy and new ways of maximizing varieties of resources effectively. And at the same time, it creates a whole new clean power industry to spur our economy into the 21st century. Seems like a good idea, right? Well, the notion is highly controversial, and especially in this particular election cycle, it is just as controversial as the notion of fracking. So tonight, I have invited some of my colleagues to talk about where we're going, and just in response, especially to the most recent vice presidential debate, and the subject that will no doubt come up in the town hall meetings on tonight at 9 p.m. on the various networks. For those who don't know, Reverend Malcom, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about who you are?
Yeah, I'm Michael Malcom. I am the founder and executive director of the People's Justice Council, as well as the executive director of the Alabama Interfaith Power and Light. I'm based in Birmingham, Alabama, and I'm grateful to be here with you all. I've been a guest on this show a few times, and I enjoy it so much that I'm taking time out of my anniversary to be with you all tonight.
Oh, bless you. Don't rub it in, Mike.
I want to make sure you hear it every time I can. That was number one. I got 20 more before the conversation over.
Oh my goodness. For those of you out there who don't, before you talk about me, just know I had not a clue until I saw it on Facebook, of all places. So, but thank you so much, and congratulations on being put up with, I'm sure, for whatever number of years. Reverend Jenkins, talk to us. Who are you?
Hello there. I'm Reverend Alan Jenkins. Congratulations, Reverend Malcom. And it's great to be back with you again, Dr. White. Thanks so much. So I'm born and raised in Atlanta and live here these days. I was a mission worker in Guatemala many years ago and learned about environmental justice and ecological justice from Mayan Indians back in the late 1990s at the end of the Civil War there. I am the founder of Earth Covenant Ministry, which works with Presbyterian churches in the greater Atlanta area. And and that blended in then to the Georgia Interfaith Power and Light organization, which continues to work with all congregations across the whole state of Georgia. And so we give thanks for their work. I am a parish associate at Oakhurst Presbyterian Church in Decatur. And I am, my full-time work is as a hospice chaplain with Harbor Grace Hospice here in Atlanta. And I'm also trained with the Climate Reality Project. I guess I was trained in 2018, perhaps.
Yeah, we see you with your mask on. Thank you for your service. Thank you for your work.
Safety first.
I'm sure your work is essential for where you are, especially in hospice in a time like this. Reverend Delé, we are honored to have you. Thank you God. Thank you for waiting to come back and join us. Talk to us, talk to our viewers who may not know who you are about, who you are and your contribution to the world of environmentalism.
Well, I'm grateful to be here. It's always lovely to be with my friends on the front lines. It lets me know that we are not alone. And so I'm thankful, I'm grateful. So I'm a grandmother, I am a pastor, I'm also a climate reality leader trained in Johannesburg. And that's where I learned that the United States responses to climate change were not really relevant to people of color. And at that point, I began traveling the East Coast, doing pilot projects and field research to determine how can communities of color engage climate change in a way that is culturally relevant and economically empowering. And so from that work, I have two national initiatives. Soil and Souls is a national network of resilience leaders, and we are launching our native and medicinal plants nursery in the Hudson Valley of New York this fall. We just finished training with indigenous leaders from my lineage, the Micmac people. And that's my on-the-ground work. And then I am also developing Spirit of Resilience, a media project that will be a radio tour where we will go out to the different indigenous communities and help them to gather resources and to make sure that those concerns are still heard as we move through a variety of climate crises. Our social climate as well as our weather climate are in peril. And I feel this is a Sankofa moment. This is when it's time to go back to the beginning to make things correct.
That's right. That's right. That's right. We're going to start our dialogue on just what I spoke about earlier. And that's that Green New Deal that was a kind of a controversial spar, if you will, in the last presidential debate. A lot of people, especially my viewers, may not necessarily understand just what the Green New Deal is and how it has navigated itself into the realm of politics and how it's impacting politics and why it's so controversial in this election cycle. And I will, as I was before the show, I was talking about how I'm such a late bloomer when it comes to the entire notion of the climate crisis. So I'm going to yield this discussion. I'm going to participate, but I would like one of my panelists here to just kind of start, just let us define what this Green New Deal is. Anyway.
Well, could I give an intro to Reverend Malcom?
Sure.
So the Green New Deal is inspired by the New Deal, which happened between 1933 and 1939 in this country. That was in the wake of the Great Depression in this country, which began around 1929, a huge economic collapse across the land. We should note that leading up to that great economic collapse of 1929, well, we haven't had that kind of inequality, wealth inequality in this country until now. We have similar, or if not greater, inequality in the land today as we did in the late 1920s, leading up to this great economic collapse. So in any event, Franklin Delano Roosevelt came into office, and he proposed and pushed through a series of programs that were public work projects, that were financial reforms and regulations, all under this umbrella called the New Deal. And so that included things like relief, reform, and recovery from the Great Depression. It included the development of major federal programs and agencies, including the Civilian Conservation Corps, the Civil Works Administration, the Farm Security Administration, the National Industrial Recovery Act, and the Social Security Administration. Out of that, which we have Medicare and Medicaid, right? And that program lifted scores of people out of poverty, especially the elderly. Now, of course, that program was attacked by more conservative movements and Republicans from the 1930s, and it still continues to be a conversation today. And there is contention about this program and it's being more socialist. Of course, I'm not a scholar on the New Deal, but I do know that it certainly came up short, and there were projects like the construction of dams and hydroelectric projects, which did not respect the rights of indigenous peoples, to say nothing of the rest of God's creation. And so that's one of the negative legacies that we have of the New Deal are that all the dams that were constructed on these amazing rivers of what Native Americans call Turtle Island, that is North America. But nonetheless, it lifted many out of poverty and created jobs with living wages. And so that is the inspiration today for the Green New Deal with an ecological lens.
Yeah, and so not just ecological, but equity as well, and justice, or for a better way of putting justice, fairness. So the Green New Deal, and I hope my Sunrise Movement folk ain't listening to me right now. And if you are and I mess up, please do me a favor and pull me to the side. Don't call me out in public, if you will. Now, but seriously, so the Green New Deal is a layout. It isn't necessarily this structured package to say do this, do that, do this, do that. It gives you a basis on what could be done to shift systems so that systems are more equitable and just. Not just the ecological system from a vegetative state, but looking at the way that we do labor, looking at the way that we do green infrastructure, looking at the way that we build our buildings and weatherize our homes, retrofitting, looking at where nuclear comes into play. All of these things are taken into account, and so what they did was left it up to legislation to pass to the legislators to pass legislation that actually makes this come to fruition, and so the struggle then became against, for me, more fundamentally lobbyists. That would then come in to try to dampen that.
Okay. All right. Reverend Delé, was there more that you wanted to add?
I think that I would just say it's, I call it a placeholder. You know, it's kind of an economic placeholder that was put in place at the federal level. And so anyone who wants to do anything innovative or new can say, oh, this is the Green New Deal. And so they type that in, and whatever funds that have been allocated to that state can then come down the chute. It has been very ambiguous, and which allows our politicians to continue to be, I think, a little bit slippery as they address economic and environmental injustice. Yeah. You asked.
Thank you, Rev, because you set it off. I appreciate you for saying that. One of the things that Reverend Allen made, one of the points he made when he introduced was saying that the Green New Deal fell short. And no doubt the new Green New or the green I meant the New Deal fell short, and no doubt the Green New Deal also now falls short. And so because of that, you have various groups that are raising up. Right now in the South, we're working on the Gulf South Green New Deal, which is led by Colette Pichon Battle and the Gulf Center for Law and Policy. And that's a table that I sit at. We also know that there's a red new deal, which talks about indigenous rights and what they need in the new deal. And at some point, it's meant for all of those to converge and to provide real community solutions, community-led solutions that give us real progress.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that gives us a great baseline. You guys have provided a great baseline of information to educate the viewers on exactly what the Green New Deal is. It all sounds good, but for some reason, it's all controversial. And so the question I would ask is, why is it so controversial? Of course, I can give my take on it, but in a nutshell, I rather yield to you guys because you're more informed than I am.
Well,
not by a long shot about that being more informed. Don't even try it. This your show. If we sitting on it, we got our own show. You got a whole show. No, the reason why it's so controversial is the same reason why this pandemic is so controversial. We have politicized everything, and we've politicized climate change to our detriment. And because you have corporate interest that wants to stifle the progress because they profit off of destroying the planet. They profit off of these extractive industries. And so in order to keep them going, you got to keep the systems in place. And so they lobby for the status quo that continues to destroy us. And unfortunately, they've got economic power. And so it makes it controversial because what they do is they don't go to your legislator and say, you can't vote on this. We gave you money, you can't vote on this. What they do instead is use their influence, grab somebody from some university, some professor that's willing to write an article that's controversial. They read it, and that gives them their talking points. Mm-hmm. And now you hear them pushing their talking points. Listen at the last debates with both Donald Trump and Mike Pence. Listen at their talking points. You can darn near put them side by side, and they were saying the same thing.
But I wonder if they knew what they were saying.
I think we have a problem because we have a society that is not based on life. Our values and our laws are not based on life. They are not based on balanced relationships. They are not based on harmony. They're not based on any of the spiritual principles that all of our religions say are good for human beings. That's and right. Those principles only come into play when we have relationship with nature, because nature is the template for how we balance. Nature is the template for how we interact with each other. How do we take personalities and ecosystems that are opposite, deserts and rainforests, and prairies and tundras, how do all of those systems allow for diversity? And that's where we learn about diversity is watching the 7 layers of our ecosystems. 7 layers is what makes an ecosystem mature when it gets to the point where it regenerates itself. You no longer have to have input in, everything just recycles itself. And so that's why we have in our native traditions looking forward to 7 generations, because nature has already told us how to layer for 7 generations so things continue to take care of themselves. We know how to grow food without tearing up the earth. You know, we know how to fish. We know how to keep the water and the air clean because we use the natural filters that God put here for free, and we don't overload the system. And so why is this controversial? Because we have a system in place that is that only runs on destruction. That's its purpose, and that's what fuels it. And the more destruction it creates, the stronger it becomes. And so, and to some extent, we've all bought into that because we think it's important to have these arguments about things that don't make a difference, rather than to spend that money and time putting the earth back together. And so it's because we've missed all of the foundational levels of what brings life and what keeps us joyful, what keeps us energized and motivated and living meaningful lives. You know, we've bought into a system that thrives on controversy, that thrives on a predatory instinct. That's where extraction comes from, because you're always pulling the life out of something. And so this is just kind of business as usual.
Well, I keep hearing that the politicians talk about, okay, well, if we do engage this Green New Deal, it's going to take away jobs, it's going to rob the economy, and so I think it's
going to keep rich people from making more money. We have systems in place where, you know, now some people are going to cringe at this, but there have been studies that say that we could, if all of us made $30,000 a year, you know, we could all have pretty much, you know, a sustainable life. Now, so people who are making millions of dollars a year, they don't want to hear that, you know. So it's about sharing, and it's about not caring that a large number of people have nothing. I mean, so it's kind of.
Rev Delé, if I could share, you're talking about you know, First Nations peoples and the seventh generation ethic.
Mm-hmm.
It also brings to mind Exodus 34, 6 and 7, verses 6 and 7 of chapter 34 in Exodus, where Moses is receiving the Ten Commandments after he had broken the first two tablets had been broken. So the Lord passes before Moses and proclaims, the Lord, God, a God merciful and gracious, slow to anger, and abounding in steadfast faithfulness and love, keeping steadfast love for the 1,000th generation, forgiving iniquity and transgression and sin, yet by no means clearing the guilty, but visiting the iniquity of the parents upon the children and the children's children to the 3rd and 4th generation. So there's this sense of blessing, of keeping the Creator's commandments, and those blessings go to the 1,000th generation. But our sins will follow us to the 3rd and 4th generation, right? And so there's this sense of longevity and of taking the longer haul picture. But we, of course, as you all have been saying, have an economy that is set up for short-term profit at the expense of God's people and God's creation.
And God's economy. And people don't really look at God as an economist. But if you consider the definition of economy, it spells out the nature of a household. We all know that the world is God's household.
That's right.
And He has created elements and that serve as provision for our sustainability. And so when we don't honor that by doing things to destroy our environment, then we are in effect not just affecting our own economy, but it's really not our economy. It's God's economy.
Right.
Not really trying to get off into a theological discussion, although that's okay if that's that's what we need to do. But really, it's people don't really think of a lot of conservative views, and a lot of the evangelicals will say that when we bring God into the discussion, we are indeed in effect making a conflict between church and state. I would argue.
Yeah.
Well, that's because they forget that Sabbath, you know.
Go ahead.
Yeah, Sabbath is, you know, remember the Sabbath to keep it holy. The whole purpose of Sabbath was to economically balance the community. You know, the idea was that don't work people, you know, all day, 7 days a week. I mean, and I don't think that we remember that that was really the original intent. God has always meant for our economic well-being to be balanced with our mental health and our emotional health. It was not meant to put our family off balance. It was meant to be a blessing. And so it can only be a blessing when you have rest time, you know, rest
And to
time
let
for
the
you.
land rest, to let the
Right.
land rest as well.
Exactly.
That's right. That's right. That's right. And that
It was intended to allow for creation as a whole to rest. And Reverend Delé, I can remember when we talked before, you had actually brought up the fact that the land or the air in India was clearing up when people were sheltering in place.
Right.
If we just
Absolutely.
allowed for the land to rest, if we allowed for us to have rest, we shut down for a few days or shut down for a few hours a day, so that the atmosphere can just rest, so that our bodies can just rest. We'd be a whole lot more productive. I was amazed when I was over in Spain. I was over in Madrid, Spain for COP. And when I was over there, it was amazing because during the day, nobody was walking around. You'd see nobody. But like as soon as it started getting evening and the sun started going down, you'd see families out walking their children, people walking their dogs. And they said that during the day, people are resting. They are more productive in the evening time. And so they come out and they have their dinner at like 9 o'clock at night. They just get going.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is when we start valuing rest and allowing for rest to be something that we hold as being sacred again. Part of our capitalistic understanding is that we've got to work, produce, do. And we do it not just in our relationships with land, not just in our relationships with things and stuff, but we do it in relationship with one another as well.
Yes, we do.
Amen. Amen.
Right. That's right. And so that's very important to remember. The Bible says that on the seventh day, he rested. So if God rested after creating the whole world, then why is it so hard for us to do that? American economy, the American culture is rooted in capitalism. That means we work. Nobody ever told us not to work. Work is almost like a badge of honor to say that you're working. But there's also provision for rest, just as you say, Reverend Malcolm. And when we don't take advantage of the Sabbath, then we are in effect perpetuating that conflict that has always existed between church and the state. And not just that, but we are in conflict with a covenant that God has set for each of us in his commandments. And so I don't think we have matured to that yet.
And if I could just go ahead.
No, go ahead. I'll go next.
This is, we beat up a bit on conservatives, and I'm struggling with that right now too, with people who are near and dear to me in this word conservative. But these values that we're talking about right now are ultimately conservative. They're conservative to conserve our lives. They are rooted in the scriptures, and they are rooted in the wisdom of other religious traditions as well. They are ultimately conservative to conserve and to preserve and to protect life.
That was our first commandment, was to serve and preserve. I say that often in the Hebrew, la'avad and lishmor, that phrase that has been translated to mean till and keep. Well, it actually means to serve and preserve. As Joshua said, as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. That's that word that that's there. And if we had put that word in our mind and in our being, that we should be serving nature, serving the environment, then we would be closer to what God has called us to be. And that's the first thing God said. So here I've created all this abundance. This is your Mother Earth. Take care of her. And so how is it that we've turned away from that? There's an interesting story in our training this weekend that from the indigenous perspective, when they were watching the Europeans come to Turtle Island, and the first thing they saw the Europeans do was cut down the trees that had food in them. And they said, what's wrong? We don't understand that. And then they scraped the land bare. So took all the rest of the food off of the land, and then planted some other plants that they gave to their animals, and then they ate the animals. And the indigenous people were saying, what's wrong with these people? He says, you have created, you've spent a lot of energy to create less food. God put us in a garden, not a farm or a plantation. So your daily work was meant to be enjoyable. He says, just go pick some plants. You don't have to, to kill yourself working and tilling, and just, this group of people, take your musicians with you. And, while you all go up the Eastern Ridge, go pick, some blueberries, go pick some nuts over here. You all go catch some fish and come back and we'll all feast together. And that was the nature of life at that time for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. And so why we think that we have progress when we have created a system that makes people break down mentally. It destroys the family relationships. It destroys the earth. So I'm not sure why we think we have made progress.
Yeah, if I could interject a passage here. Jesus says, therefore I say unto you, be not anxious for your life, what you shall eat or what you shall drink, not yet for your body. Behold the birds of heaven. They sow not, neither do they reap, nor gather into barns, and your heavenly Father feedeth them. Are not ye of much more value than they?
Yeah, I agree with both. God has an ecology. And when I look at creation care, it means that God created and we maintain, period. And I think where we've separated is we've become isolated and individualized, and we think that as long as we're sustained, it's sustainable. And so everybody's taking, and nobody's putting back, which creates this extractive relationship instead of us having regenerative relationships.
Right.
And the reality is, if we don't change our perspective, we won't change the system.
Yeah.
What we'll wind up doing is just replacing another extractive system with an extractive system that we already have. We've got to change the way that we look at relationship with people and planet, and look at it as being regenerative instead of extractive.
Right. Without a vision, the people perish.
Absolutely.
And the Green New Deal is a vision.
Yeah. Right. And that's exactly what the Green New Deal is, which is why I get so excited about the Green New Deal, and why I pick up just thinking about it, because it's a vision. And I don't know about you all, but I can create in vision. I can't create in systems that status quo that tells me I've got to do the same thing over and over in the same routine way. But if I've got vision, I can create based off of vision. A vision is a map. You still have to travel to get there, but a vision is a map. And that's what this does. Unfortunately, and I really believe our biggest problem in America, and the reason why we rushing to open our doors, and the reason why we can't get rid of coronavirus and that it keeps spiking, is because we lack vision. We lack creative.
We also lack some of our indigenous knowledge. You know, the countries where the virus has gone down, many of those countries are using, you know, natural means to take care of themselves. They are, you know, misting their children with aromatherapies, you know, these oils and things that are naturally antiviral. You know, they're just being extra clean, and they're not rebellious. You know, so they're looking at what is the solution, what are some common sense things we can do, and they're just doing it. It
Yeah.
it's actually very simple. And so if
Yeah.
other countries that we think are behind are actually moving through this pandemic better than we are, then I think we really need to look at ourselves and really say, how can we stop being so selfish, and how can we stop being so ignorant of how our environment, you know, works with us? What about our herbs, you know, and our herbalists and our natural medicines? You know, we need to bring those back. I think what a lot of people may not know is that the American Medical Association only came into being after they had gone through a very vicious attack of the midwives and the herbalists. You go back through the records in Congress, and it was a witch hunt where they were just demonizing everything that was natural and everything that was working at that time. And so then they put in this system. So they kicked the women out of the healing system, and, you know, put men in control of women's bodies, and put men in control of the earth, things that they don't really know a whole lot about. And so, you know, so I think I'm just saying, okay, like I'm just saying. But the point is that there are natural systems and already in place. There is a means for all of us to move through this pandemic. The virus is really, it's not even a living organism. Okay, the virus is just a protein inside of a fat cell. And so that's why washing your hands, you know, all that friction dissolves it. You can't kill it, you just dissolve it. You know, that's why alcohol works. You're just dissolving this, and then it, you know, it moves on to, you know, the next place where it can be. So again, I think we need to get rid of the fear and stop making things so mysterious, and help people to, you know, just do some common sense things so we all can get on with our lives.
And I think you bring up a really good, a very good point, Reverend Delé, when you talk about the things, the common sense things. And when you look at the Bible and you look at the story, just the beginning story of Adam and Eve, it's a very common sense type of approach to how God has established an order or a kingdom in which humans are to operate in. Even getting down to the eating of the forbidden fruit, very common sense, very natural. You know, who told you you were naked? And so American culture has developed and evolved itself into this machine that has brought about a variety of of unnatural and human-made types of things, and most definitely during this pandemic is almost a symbol that or an indicator that America's moral compass, America's moral outlook and approach to lifestyle, food, all the things that make up American culture is definitely in a position of reckoning, where our moral values, what we value, what's important to us, is being called to the carpet. And how we handle this pandemic everywhere, from not just the pandemic, but this election cycle, how we selected Supreme Court justice, everything that's a part of American culture is called to a sort of reckoning in terms of reorganizing and rethinking how we engage our lifestyles. And it could be that God is calling for us to simplify and get back to the natural way of doing things, the common sense things that you're saying, Reverend Daley, that we may need to engage in.
Mm-hmm.
And I know I'm sounding very much like a conservatist at this point, but I really feel like this is one of the signs of our times. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll agree with that, Rev. I'll also say that we have tended to, well, better yet, you made the statement American culture. And I would say that we have a narrow look when we think it's just American culture. It's a system. It's capitalism.
Sure.
Capitalism has pushed us to a point where we look at people as commodity, where we look at the planet and the planet's resources as commodity.
But all of that is a part of American culture that has perpetuated itself since the inception of this country.
Yeah, it's definitely a part of American culture. But now understand, American culture was never, ever, never, ever equitable. It wasn't built to be equitable. We think the system's broken. That's our falsehood.
Yeah,
the system's not broken. The system's operating exactly the way that it's supposed to operate. And understand that capitalism needs free and cheap labor in order to thrive. It cannot grow if it's equitable. It has to be inequitable in order for it to grow. The only thing that you can do is repurpose this system or get rid of it.
Sure.
Well, I think our young people are looking at ways to replace the system. Okay,
But that's what this Green New Deal is.
Yeah, they're looking at ways that we can bring back cooperative businesses, and looking at, how can we be sovereign, food and water sovereign within our localities. We know that the state of Vermont is food sovereign because they've taken all of those little enclaves in the mountains and they decide that they're going to do business with each other. They're not going to worry about imported items. They're going to be happy to eat what's available in the season and then move on to eat what's available in the next season. And so but that's a lifestyle choice where we have to decide that, we can't have grapes all year long. We're going to have grapes during their season. You can't have watermelon all year long. You're going to eat watermelon in its season, and getting ourselves accustomed to that kind of discipline and not thinking that that's a lack of progress, so we have some emotional growing up that we have to do as we move towards, a new system.
Yeah. So the work that is given to us is continuing to push a compelling vision to supplant the capitalist American extractive vision for success that so predominates this land, and so putting forth a vision that is compelling, that is sustainable, and that draws us towards the abundance that is right before us. Now, I went on a medicinal plant walk just not far from me here, not far from downtown Atlanta, along the Yellow River, and plant after plant that we saw in this intact watershed along the river has medicinal properties. We even learned that kudzu actually has tons of medicinal properties that were used in China, where the kudzu originally came from. All before us, we have this incredible richness. We just need to redefine what richness and abundance is right before us.
Alan, did you know that in the 1800s that most people had dandelion lawns? That's people would get rid of their grass and grow dandelions because the roots are good blood purifiers. It's a coffee substitute. The flower itself has lecithin in it, so it helps to get rid of the fats in your systems. The greens have abundant mineral values and iron, so that you have energy. And so now we pay premium price for we got dandelion salad, but when you have it in your yard, you're tearing it up. So again, there's a disconnect. We only know that it's good for us when we're paying a premium price. We're not valuing something that God gave us for free. We don't know that really the plants will come to you. Our grandparents used to talk about volunteer plants in the garden, and when you have a medical condition, the plant that will treat that condition will all of a sudden just appear in your garden. The wind will bring it, the animals will bring it, however they bring it. But that's the kind of, we found that out when we did medicinal plant walks in Washington, D.C., and with the African Holistic Health Association. And they would go around from house to house and to all of their clients, and they would say, well, this person has diabetes, and they didn't know that this plant in their yard fixes diabetes. This person has high blood pressure, and the plant that fixes that is in their yard. And so God has a system of communication that whatever we need will actually come to us if we don't poison everything. And if we allow, even right now, you talk about a vision, some neighborhoods are getting together and they're deciding as a neighborhood what they're going to plant in their yards. They're planting different things in each other's yards so that they can harvest food together. Okay, so that's a sustainable vision.
So now, Reverend, so not to cut you off, but you bring up that point about systems, and I don't want us. We have just about 15 minutes left, and I want us to educate our viewers on this issue of fracking, because I have a strong belief that we, especially when you talk about, Reverend Delé, when you talk about how God has made provision for us. You know, our water is a very natural resource for us that has been provided for us. And so I feel like we need to talk about fracking, because I have a very strong position on it that I want to share.
Well, we ought to let you go first.
well, okay, but I'd rather share my opinion after you guys define. Tell us about
well, fracking is basically when you blow up the bedrock of your environment. You know, you have the soil on top, you have the plants and the trees, so you scrape all of that off, and when you get down to the bedrock, what holds the planet together, you blow that up, and then you infuse poisonous chemicals and salt. You push that in, pressurize it, push it into the rock, and that makes the gas inside come out. Okay, so basically, if you look at the stones on our planet, they're like the bones. So that would be like saying, okay, well, we're going to take this human being, we're going to skin them, and we're going to boil their bones until we can get to the marrow. We're just going to pull the marrow out of the bones, and we're just going to throw these human beings away. Okay, I mean, that's really what we're doing. So we've become cannibalistic. Okay, when you're talking about fracking, you're destroying the ground that you're walking on. You're using millions of gallons of clean water with the poison. You put that in, and so not only have you're carting in millions of gallons of clean water, mixing it with poisons, pushing it into this to the bedrock, blowing it up, and then after the gas comes out, you capture that to clean that up. To clean it up. Now that all of that runs into the water system you're poisoning your water system twice. Okay.
In Oklahoma, it's actually caused this fracturing deep under the surface of the ground is actually causing earthquakes. If you look to see where most earthquakes are now occurring in Turtle Island on North America, you'll find in Oklahoma, where a lot of fracking takes place, people are experiencing earthquakes. I'd also say quickly, too, that the American Petroleum Institute states that 7.5 million jobs are related to fracking. And that's the number. The president is saying that 8 million jobs are related to fracking. And that is, according to the Food and Water Watch nonprofit advocacy organization, is a hugely overblown statistic, which includes people working at gas stations and the like. But if you actually go to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, they count 636 total jobs, as opposed to 8 million. So there's some big numbers that are being thrown around that if we ban fracking, it's going to shut down the economy.
That's just over exaggeration.
But listen at the rhetoric though, y'all. The rhetoric is always the same. It never changes. It's always, anytime they want things to be passed or they want to convolute things from it being right or wrong, they start talking about it's going to kill jobs. It's going to destroy the economy. And everybody gets so panicked about that they forget, hey, is this right or wrong?
Right. It's based on the
At the end of the day, I think what Reverend Delé and what you were doing, Reverend Jenkins, was really driving home why we exist, and especially why we exist in this movement. We reorient people to the conversation of morality. Is this right or wrong? Is it right or wrong that you kill your aquatic life, which we actually, believe it or not, we eat more sea life than we do land life? Are you going to kill your natural resources? Are you going to kill off your water sources? And basically, are you going to kill off yourself?
Yeah, we are slowly committing suicide. You know,
Yes.
how is it? Why would you?
It ain't so
put
slow.
your house on?
Here's my question. Here's my
slow about it, right?
Here's my question, Reverend. What was good about fracking? It had to be something, because
Oh hell, you tell me.
If money is your God, that's all you need. I mean, it's really, if money is your God, all you need is to shake a few dollars in front of someone's face and say, you know, you're going to make a few of these dollars, and that's it. You know, that people bow down and they do insane things because there never has been anything sensible about fracking ever.
Right.
I mean, it has caused earthquakes, even at the time when they're blowing up the bedrock. It causes earthquakes then. It creates fault lines for more earthquakes. It ruins water for miles and miles and miles. It poisons the soil. I don't get it.
So there's nothing positive about fracking.
Nothing, not one thing. The few jobs that are in the fracking industry could easily be shifted to solar energy, you know, and other, you know, alternatives that are actually clean. But when you have a society that says that nuclear power is clean power, you know, there's some insanity here. We know you can never get rid of nuclear waste, and some people have been saying, well, we have to have nuclear. Yeah. So, you know, you know, you've got some sanity. You know, you've got to look reality. Where are some facts? You know, where's the truth?
So that's amazing. And Reverend Jenkins mentioned that 700 jobs, but the figure ended up being 7 million. And then in the vice presidential debate the other night, you had Senator Harris to say, well, Vice President Biden is not going to he's not going to ban fracking. He's not going to ban fracking. But if we lose 700 jobs, but we end up getting a whole new stream of ways to keep people employed, then, I mean, isn't that a good thing? I mean, I don't know. I'm just trying to understand and allow our viewers to understand, why did this come into being in the first place, and what made it a good thing? And was it ever a good thing? And if it's not a good thing,
just lies.
Why don't we ban it?
Yeah,
I think the people who make millions of dollars have more power than those of us who make, you know, regular salaries. It's really a very simple power dynamic.
I think for me, to answer that question, I need more expertise than I have. And so the only thing I can tell you about is the effect of fracking and why it should stop. But how it came into being and who said it would be a great idea to put poison in the air and in our water systems, I have the slightest idea. I have the slightest idea.
Well, Dr. White, you tell us what are your opinions?
Well, I mean, I just feel like, you know, the entire notion of fracking, along with what we're talking about this Green New Deal, is, as Reverend Jenkins said, is highly overstated, and it's going to be overstated because of the agendas of the politicians that are speaking against it, and even those that are speaking for it. And in the process, there's a lot of misinformation. There's a lot of because of it, that, and it has indeed been politicized. There's a lot of misinformation about how these things are affecting our environment, and which is a major reason why I have this show and this segment. I produced this segment because I feel like especially the African American community, which is disproportionately affected by climate justice issues, is hugely undereducated about the impacts of this crisis that we're in, and we need to be more aware of of what our rights are or what the issues are. And so when we talk about things like fracking, and we talk about things like the Green New Deal, it's really a matter of being educated, tuning in, sharing, asking questions, and being informed. And that's just the bottom line.
I totally agree with that. And one of the things that I'm doing with our young adults is, creating that vision of how they can manage their own energy resources and how can they create businesses to serve their own communities. One of the things, without, it says, my people perish for lack of knowledge. One of the things that our advocacy has sometimes glosses over are the practical skills that we need to learn to take care of ourselves. And so that's why with Soil and Souls, with the young adults and the leadership institutes that I do from time to time, that's what we're learning, are practical skills and learning what makes up a food system. How do you put the ecosystem back together? How do you introduce the microbes and the different beings that will make us the air healthy, because there are ways to create health while we're in court fighting for our rights. There are things we can do. We can create biohedges. We can put in our own water filtering systems. There are technologies available that are very simple that we can use to take care of ourselves, while we're fighting for our rights. We don't have to do one or the other. We need to create a both and our financing systems need to include teaching us practical skills for collecting our water, for purifying our water. We don't have to pay Shell Oil millions of dollars for them to use mushrooms to clean up their oil spills. We can grow our own mushrooms and clean up the spills that they have. You see,
Go ahead, finish up.
I was just saying, we have our own systems, and that's where we have to get back to some indigenous ways, indigenous values, so that we value being in relationship with nature, and we're not afraid of it. It's not a foreign object. It's a part of us. It's the air we breathe. It gives us the color on our skin. It forms, it gives us the minerals, everything that we have that gives us vitality. That is nature. And God put us in relationship so that nature purifies our emotions. It balances our mental, our mind, and it nourishes our body. And when we get back into right relationship, then we won't be so scared. We won't be so easily fooled by the lies that we're told.
Well, thank you so much, Reverend Delé, for that. Thank you, Reverend Malcom. And thank you to Reverend Alan Jenkins for your contribution on tonight. We're going to go ahead. We're at the 1 hour mark, and we're going to go ahead and end. But I want to thank everybody for tuning in tonight. And this has been a rich conversation. We're going to continue this conversation because there's much to be discussed about the election cycle. And so our next show is going to be the week after. I think it's the week after the presidential election. So there's going to be a lot to talk about then. And so tune in next week for our show. For our show on next week is on gardening, and which has definitely turned out to be a bit of a trend now. And so if you want to you want to know anything about farming and starting your own garden, the next week is the week to watch us. Until then, I want to thank everyone for tuning in. A special thanks to Kisa Public Radio. And remember, I leave you to remember those famous words by the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, that whatever affects one of us directly affects us all indirectly. Good night, everyone, and be safe.